Yeah, I just keep it steady on the magic. Do my thing, I'm healing, it's fantastic. If I fall, rise automatic. You ain't no now, you know. I'm the one raise myself like a tree from the roots. West side girl, cause she lit in the coast. East side girl when she speaks to the roots. Stay 100 cause she on with the truth. Been there on struggle, know that it pass. Only going up, yeah, the pain don't last. Ooh, take off. Ooh, take off. Ooh, take off. This is take off, take off, take off. Shorty like Brandy, fight like Monica. What you know about her? Baby girl rising, way to the top. Shaking the world, don't expect her to stop. Purpose so great, she get what she got. Follow her step, cause she following God. What you need more, got a heart full of gold. Even at times when it's raining and cold. Ooh, she bout take off. Ooh, she bout.
Hey, y'all, it's your girl Hannah, aka Ruta, and you are watching the Uprooted Network. Today is Manifest Mondays, and the internet is trying very hard to cancel this today. So we're going to try this one last time, get my guy Hayet on here, see if we can get the conversation going on taking accountability. I will take accountability for not fixing this Wi-Fi before I try to get on today. So we'll see how that goes, but I hope everybody's Monday is going great, that y'all are living lavishly, but more so than ever that you are taking care of yourself and taking the time that you need. It has been an extremely hard weekend, and as you can tell by this hating ass internet, has not been an easy one. Your girl has also been dealing with acid reflux and an upset stomach all week that gets exacerbated by my PCOS. And it is PCOS Awareness Month, so if you guys haven't, please go check out and look into polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's just not the funnest or easiest thing to deal with, I promise you that much. So let me see if my internet will hold up. Let's see. It's not acting right today. Yay, you're here.
What's up? We're back.
Oh man, I had to go sit outside, so hopefully it stays up and working.
It's a lot clearer now, so I can see you very, very clearly now, so that's good.
Okay, let me know if the noise in the background is a lot, because there's a busy street next to me. I don't know if you can hear those cars. But yes, I was like, what is it? Instagram big hate, and I was already feeling sick this weekend, and now they don't want me to talk about taking accountability and responsibility. Like, big hater energy. So hopefully, whoever was in here will find their way back. If not, they will catch the rerun. But we were talking about something really important. We've been talking about understanding forgiveness, that like road of how do we get there. Last week we talked about empathetic listening, and the week before that, overcoming hate. And so this week we want to talk about taking responsibility and what that looks like when harm has been caused. So you were in the middle of explaining a sermon or a passage to us all. So I'll let you catch back up to where you were.
Yeah, okay, I guess I'll just do everything over again, so it's all good. So this idea of responsibility, reconciliation, forgiveness, it's so idealistic when you talk about it in just like layman's terms, but the actual practice of it, the application of it, it's so tedious, and it requires a lot of hard work, but it requires active participation for both parties. And so that's why this series had like a lot of steps to it. Like, it's acknowledging within what's in you to like let go of that anger, because letting go of that anger kind of breeds the room for forgiveness. And then it requires active listening and empathetic listening to empathize with someone, to feel what they're feeling. And then we're now on week 3 talking about taking responsibility. And it's one of the biggest bridges and steps to reconciliation, because you actually get to sit down at the table, you get to talk to the person you have a conflict with, whether it's interpersonally or on a large national scale, or in a group setting, however it's handled. And you get to take this these ideas that we've been ruminating over for the past 2 weeks and kind of put them into practice in a sense. And so I wrote down something that was kind of interesting that I got from the book. And so the book that we've been using to kind of frame our conversation around this series is interfaith just peacemaking. And so this principle is called principle number 4, and it's acknowledge responsibility for conflict and injustice and seek repentance and forgiveness. And so that's what we're kind of framing our conversation on today. And hopefully there's no interruptions. This looks like it's going to be a good call, so I'll just
Yes.
do it. So I wrote down empathy requires laying aside one's own interests, and empathy requires perspective and understanding of the other side. And so I guess when we kind of come to that place of where we are not foregoing our interests in a say, but like putting it aside to actively listen and to hear what the other person's saying, we can kind of engage in this step of responsibility and forgiveness. And so I wanted to start off with a passage of scripture because, Rosa didn't go to church yesterday, so I'm going to bring church to her on a Monday.
Yes, thank you. I was struggling yesterday, so let your girl know.
Yeah, so I just read this passage before, but I'll read it again. So this comes from the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 5, verses 38 to 42. And Jesus, some context about this, Jesus is giving his famous Sermon on the Mount. He's doing it in front of a group of large people, and he's laying down the foundation for his ministry, but also the principles and more so the lifestyle we should live if we're considered followers of the way. And so we'll engage with the Christian perspective, and because the merits of this book, we'll kind of jump around from like the Jewish perspective, the Muslim perspective, and kind of wrap this around. So back to Matthew, it says, "You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you." And so here Jesus is kind of presenting this idea of, well, if someone wrongs you, you repeat a wrong within the wrong, right? And so Jesus kind of course corrects that. He takes the culture context and he says, well, you heard that it was said this way, but this is how we need to start living now. And so it's quite interesting because you read that and you're like, oh yeah, it's pretty good, but like, how do you actually put this into I guess how do you act this out on a daily basis? And so some of the notes I wrote down, some notes I wrote down was and this is from the Jewish scholar David Gordis. I'm not pronouncing the name. So the Hebrew word for like conflict is shaver. So shaver means to break apart, and it requires healing to bring about this idea of shalom, like reconciliation and peace, reintegration. And so conflict and violence is what David Gordis says. Conflict and violence represent a cosmic distortion and disruption that requires repairing and correction. And so this repairing and correction, once it comes to fruition, is called teshavot. So that's the Hebrew word teshavot. It means return. So we're returning to something. And so I think it's pretty cool that it really kind of ties into this idea of reconciliation that not only is just from like a Jewish perspective, but a Christian perspective, but it's also from a Muslim perspective. This Muslim scholar, Muhammad Shafiq, he says justice must be established, and peace without justice is just a dream. And so it's quite nice that, you can't have reconciliation without acknowledging injustice and what's happened. And so one party or both parties have to kind of take responsibility for what's happened and to move forward to the future. And I think it's awesome, and I'll probably stop here and kind of unpack more. But it's cool that if you if you read the Old Testament, the New Testament, or even the Quran, you can see like the through line of God's love and redemption, and He's always actively seeking reconciliation with humankind. He's always forgiving. He's always looking through and forgiving people, like reconciling Israel to Himself. Like if you read through the Old Testament, through Kings, through the Chronicles, throughout like the narrative and the history of Israel, they always mess up, and he always gives them second chances, and He's always looking to reconcile. And I believe that's where we can kind of frame our idea of forgiveness. And obviously we're not God in our own rights, but God does lay a framework of reconciliation and forgiveness, and He puts down specific steps, whether it's through we can read and analyze from like a second perspective, reading the history, are just reading Jesus' principles. There's this idea of forgiveness that's always been laid down, and reconciliation, and it requires a lot of work. It requires to love your enemies, and this is something that's not easy, but it's something that, if done right, it can bring so much peace and healing to so many people. And if we don't do it right, traversely, the opposite happens. We're left with destruction, chaos, and a world that is always in conflict. And as you can see, like, we want to return to Shabbat. We want to return to a sense of peace and to a sense of shalom that we were supposed to live in the first place. I kind of come back to on the first episode where we're talking about in the series, the Garden of Eden. It was this peaceful place, and I guess God's redemptive work is trying to return to that place, return to that garden where we have peace, restoration, and a sense of belonging and community with all people, not just our own cliques, not just with, who we like, but it's a peace and a reconciliation that kind of entangles every single person. So there's a lot there. I have a lot more, so I'm just gonna park it there for now because I have so much to say.
Yes, no, I think there was something that you brought up earlier too, before this internet kept cutting out, and breaking our show apart today. That there's a requirement of empathy, right? But there also that there is a requirement that you sort of remove yourself and your own interest and your own pain so that you can see the other person's point clearly. And to like actually listen with intention. And I think that's really, really important here when we're talking about how do we get to the point of even taking accountability. Because when you said that, I kind of thought of it in the sense of I've been through a lot of shit with some people, excuse my language, but it's like I had to kind of remove myself and my hurt and my pain in those situations to even try to acknowledge where the other person is coming from. But the part that was really important to me was, oh, I have accountability and responsibility to take as well in this scenario. Like, when they have these expressions of it takes two to tango. And so I feel like there's a part of that in which we have to reflect on where did we also contribute in this situation. It doesn't always mean that you have, but that you even have the ability, right, to be self-reflective in that way. And just as like I'm wanting the other person to take accountability, am I also willing to look in the mirror and take accountability in the areas where I might have caused harm? And like even going deeper in what I've been reflecting on this week and this weekend was, did I betray myself as well in those situations? Oh, you cut out for a second. Did you hear me? No, not the internet again, guys. Okay, I think I can see you. Uh-oh. Hayet, I hope this doesn't crash on us again.
We're back now.
Okay, we're back. Okay. I was saying the part that was really reflective for me too was, did I also betray myself somewhere along this, in whatever situation? And I felt like in this specific example I'm thinking about in my own life, I was like, oh, I also betrayed myself and the boundaries that I have for myself, and like allowing certain things to happen and not speaking up about them, and having to kind of take it from that perspective too. There's an accountability and responsibility that I have to myself to protect me. And I think that sometimes when we're mad in situations, we're so focused on the other person and what the other person has done that we're not always thinking about like, where have I had faults, or where did I hurt myself in this? And like that is part of it too. You also have to forgive yourself in this situation, and I think what you're talking about lends itself really well to the idea of like restorative justice, like that last quote that you shared from our Muslim brother Muhammad, that like justice. What did you say? Peace. What? It was so good. It was like justice without peace, or peace without justice. What was the quote?
Yeah, it says justice must be established and peace. So it says peace without justice is just a dream.
And I think that that's
Did you
what a
catch that
lot
one?
of us, yeah, that we do need this idea of restorative justice, and like what does that look like, and how do we grapple with it? And that does take a piece of you to do the self-reflection work of like, well, what would bring you back to peace? Like what would restore the harm for you?
Mm. Yeah, I like what you said earlier because it ties into exactly what I was going to say just now, and this is direct from the books, not my own knowledge. I'm just kind of reading it verbatim. It says, "People convinced of their own innocence cannot be reconciled," and so we have to fully acknowledge responsibility, because if we're so convinced that we did nothing wrong, like you said, it takes two to tango. So both parties have responsibility to acknowledge what's happened, whether it's been in the past, whether it's current. Obviously, conflict happens because of events in the past, but whether it's something that it's previous to the conflict happening now that set the stage for conflict. There's always something that we could acknowledge responsibility for, and that requires empathy. That requires honesty as well. If we're not allowing ourselves to be honest with ourselves, then we really have no business going to the table and seeking a resolution for peace, because it's tying one hand behind our backs and saying, all right, let's do business, when we're not even being honest with ourselves about why we're there in the first place. So that requires a lot of self-reflection and a lot of honesty that we have to kind of come with. And I think in our context as well with Tigray, it's like we have to acknowledge responsibility. Some of the things that's happened within Tigray prior to the war, that we have to say, okay, maybe this wasn't right, and we perhaps should have done this or just that. And there's a lot of things that we can kind of acknowledge responsibility for. And obviously, I guess on the proverbial other side, whether it's the Ethiopian government or the Hayat militia, there's an acknowledgement of responsibility for genocide, for killing the civilians, for murder, for blockade of aid, and starvation. Some of the things that we have to they kind of have to say, okay, this is what we've done wrong. And I don't think that's something that's a conflict that can kind of be resolved right now. It's going to require a lot of time and healing for this to happen before we even get to the process of, getting past anger and, getting past, listening. Like it's going to require such a long period of healing before this can even transpire. And I love the idea of that we've seen this happen on a bigger scale, but also on a national scale in many other countries, whether it's Germany in World War II and the reconciliation that happens with the Jewish people and the acknowledgement of responsibility from the German government, years later, obviously. But it's that responsibility saying, hey, this is what we did, we messed up, and we're acknowledging responsibility, and we'll never go to war again. Or it's Japan saying we don't have active military, and we'll never go to war again because of what they did in World War II. Even in Rwanda with the Tutsis and the Hutus, and that reconciliation that happened after the massacre against one people group. And so you see this trend and this pattern on a national scale throughout many different countries. And I think it's possible. It's going to require a lot of time, a lot of healing, but I think that path forward is drawn and it's carved. And whether or not the people of Tigray want to move forward, I think that's their choice. But even interpersonally as well, we can kind of use these principles like we've been talking about for the past 3 weeks, and use these within our own lives, within our own families, our own friendships, whatever have you, where there's conflict, we can use these same principles, and they apply either way.
No, really, they do, and it's I love the parts that you're speaking about, and as you were talking about specifically for me and Tigray, I think as I've reflected, and I don't know that I have the energy to fully cry this out right now, so I'm gonna probably cry this out later. But to think and to reflect on how did we get here, right? Because I've been thinking about like what does reconciliation look like for the Tigrayan people, and for me, I think I had to have a moment of truth and transparency with myself that like, where have I been? You know, like I've been going back to Adi. I've known the conditions that people live in, right? Not just in Tigray, but like the whole country of Ethiopia. There are poor people everywhere, right? While we're kicking it in Addis or going to resorts or going to these places. And like, you know, I remember the first time we went, because we were there together, seeing the Sheraton and then seeing like just the amount of poor people literally across the street living in
the
shacks.
Disparity.
Yeah, and I just remember asking those questions of like, how is this right? Like, how do you see people that are like cold and hungry, and then you see this like ridiculously nice hotel, you know what I mean, like right across the street.
Like Rihanna
that,
and Beyonce stay at,
that juxtaposition, and then to see a population of people that have to live with that, and then you have diaspora and like tourism where people are coming and they're just enjoying all the riches of your country and your land that you yourself cannot enjoy, right? And like having to reflect on, was I part of that system that continue to uplift that disparity? And it makes me sad. Like I'm really sad. And I can feel the tears coming because I should have been speaking up for these people a long time ago. Like I've known for a long time that shit wasn't right, you know, because I live in oppression in the States, you know what I mean? So like, I know what oppression looks like, and I know what suffering looks like because I've lived through it myself. And so part of me is like, had we sounded off some alarms sooner, could we have avoided all the suffering that's happening now? And I can't live in that, right? Because like we can't live in the past, but we can look at it as our teacher moving forward. That if you think about Ethiopia as a whole and the people who are fighting right now and dying, they're poor farmers. They're literally poor farmers from every side of this conflict. They're people who have been oppressed for such a long time. And I ironically had an Uber driver yesterday that was a recent refugee from Eritrea. And like, I was just like, oh man, am I going to deal with like, you know, a genocide supporter or apologist or whatever? But took the time to sit there and talk to him. And we both kind of could agree that nobody leaves their home unless something is wrong. You know, so like for him leaving Eritrea, like he was like, it's hell on earth. And for us in Tigray, it's hell on earth right now, right? Like, and we are suffering in very similar ways because of very similar issues,
right?
Of selfishness and of greed. And I was like, if we could all focus on loving ourselves and loving our people and taking care of our people instead of like constantly trying to fight everybody else, maybe we'd all prosper. Right? Like maybe we'd all be okay. And I told him, I was like, my love for my people does not equal hate for yours. Like it's not too, like, there's no binary there. You know what I mean? Like, I love me and I love my people, and I want my people to have food and to have safety and to have security and to be able to prosper. But them having that doesn't take away from you also having that. And it was like such a reflective moment for me to be like, you're not my enemy, but you have been taught to be. And it was such a hard kind of realization for me as like someone in the diaspora that is privileged in a lot of ways to have to like acknowledge that privilege as well. And then to see the events of this weekend and how people are using their privileges in ways that are harmful, that that can create and lead to other people dying because of their words and actions. I was like, I need for for myself and for the rest of us that can do good to choose to do good, because for so long we were silent and didn't say things, and now we're trying to be hypercritical. Like, this is ridiculous, you know? Like, no, people are dying unnecessarily, and the only thing that needs to happen is that we use our voice to uplift theirs. And that's like where I landed after all of that, you know? And me taking accountability in that way, that I will take accountability and responsibility for the role that I didn't play before, but that I'm choosing to play now to ensure that somebody else gets their safety and security. That was kind of a lot, but that's where I took it.
Yeah, that was a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wrote down repentance precedes forgiveness, and
Ooh.
I don't think we can be moved to forgiveness unless we repent of what's happened. And so I think what you said was beautiful, because like it's repenting of, you know, not taking responsibility or acknowledging injustice, and try to seek peace without reconciling the past. And so I think that's really important, because, you know, it must be sought. If we're gonna have a teshuvah, a return to shalom, we have to acknowledge what's happened, we acknowledge the wrong, take responsibility, and move to that place of forgiveness. And it's not easy, you know, loving your enemy, loving people who you don't necessarily agree with. And that's a skill set that's going to require a lot of development and time and patience. I'm still working on myself. You know, I'm not a holy man by any means, but I try my best to pray for those I do not like, to pray for those I do disagree with, but to be able to have the comprehension to understand, and the ability to, you know, listen, and to kind of be an open ear to perhaps someone I disagree with. And yeah, I think a lot of things you did say, like, I've noticed too, you know, and it's here in America as well. It's like, you know, how do we move forward? But then, you know, you have so much homelessness, especially, like, you know, in a city like Los Angeles. Like, how are we going to talk about, you know, helping the middle class when, you know, there's a class below that's, you know, being looked after, or looked over, sorry. And so it's hard, and I'm not a politician by any means, and so I'm not gonna sit here and give you like a 5-point plan of how we're gonna improve the city or this country. But I think when it comes to this area of forgiveness and reconciliation, it's something that we have to continually acknowledge responsibility for, what we've done, what maybe other people have done as well. And I think that really lays the groundwork and the framework for just an honest and open conversation. When, you know, you can have that kind of openness and that kind of honesty, then it's going to breed room for so much healing, I believe. When you can be, you know, real with someone, and like deep down, you know, you feel that sense of honesty that's being shared and reciprocated, and hopefully that leads to a path of reconciliation. Like I said before, and like you said before, like, you don't have to be best friends, but at least you can kind of come to an agreement or to an understanding. And if you part ways, so be it. But you know, it talks about that in the Sermon on the Mount as well, which says, you know, it says to put your offering on the side and be reconciled to someone that you have a conflict with. And I think that's important. You know, contextually, you know, it's a bit different, obviously, a first century Jew to what we're dealing with now, currently in the 21st century. But I think the same principles apply, and these same principles are time tested, and they're still so relevant today.
They are. They are. I wanted to acknowledge Superfawn. She said it's crazy how powerful humility can be, and she said thank you for yours, sis. Yeah, it is. And I think that hopefully this helps with my acid reflux too, because I know my anxiety is really what sets it off. Um, it's it's this like, I'm trying to say this without crying, so just know that the tears are here. I feel like for me, it's operating from a place of guilt, and like by me being transparent and honest with myself, that like I feel that guilt and I have been feeling that guilt, right? That survivor's guilt, the guilt of being privileged when others are not, and turning that into, no, I'm going to take accountability and responsibility. And it's an honor and a privilege to be in the position that I'm in, to have the ability to even be reflective in this way, because I'm not worried about where my next meal is coming from, you know? And I want to operate out of that place of love and care for other people, to reconcile whatever it is within myself and forgive myself, so that I can show up and be better for this movement and my people. And I want to take that attitude into all my other relationships, because I've said it before, I have lost some friendships, and I don't want it to be on a bad note. I want it to be on like, I love you and respect you, but our lives don't align anymore, you know? And to just take accountability for that conversation, instead of how we all are, where we just kind of ghost things and we don't say anything, or we're silent, because that's a betrayal of self too. Like, we're silently suffering for no reason, you know, other than our own pride and ego. And I think that that's part of, you know, why we're advocating so loud and why our voices are so loud, because at least for myself, I was silent for a long time. And I'm mad at myself, and I resent myself, and I've resented leaders and all these other people. But it's like, when you got to look in the mirror and be like, well, what were you doing, sis? You so critical about everybody else, and it's like, but you haven't. What have you done to help? What have you done? And when you're able to finally have that conversation, like I've been trying to have with myself, you got to cry that out, and you got to release some of that. Because you realize how much you've betrayed yourself over the years, not just within this conflict, but in other situations where you have been hurt or you have caused hurt and have never taken the time to take the responsibility there, or have other people taken that. And I think I'm hoping and praying, and I'm manifesting for us, because it is Manifest Mondays, that we are able to get to that place of being able to look in the mirror and be reflective. And if we want to see more people take accountability, for the things that they have done, then we also need to take accountability for the things that we have done, whether to ourselves or to others. So I looked at the time, and I know you have a hard stop because you got a meeting to run into. I am at an emotional hard stop because I am still feeling kind of sick, guys. I know I don't look like it because I don't know how. God just be blessing me this way. But I am feeling really, really tired. Like, my body is really tired, and I'm gonna be honest with myself there that I need to take a break, and I will be watching Netflix for the next couple hours, and eating bland ass oatmeal. So pray for you, girl. But I wanted to say thank you, Hayet, because this has been such an interesting experience and series, and I know that we have been running around with our schedules, just trying to make it happen. And I know that you're doing your best, and I'm doing my best, and so I'm just grateful that we can both show up in this way all the time. And it's a beautiful process. So I want to say that that's a good stopping point. Unless you want to, I'll let you have the last closing words and let everyone know. We will be going over this on Thursday, and debriefing further, just so that we can get heavier into the conversation. But this was a good starting point.
Yeah, I think a good place to end is with the back to the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus gives, and the idea of, you know, looking. He says, like, looking at the speck within your own eye before judging someone else. So and I guess, you know, to kind of put like a 21st century translation on it, it's looking at the fault within before judging someone else's own faults. And so I think that's something that we can always continually practice. and use as a principle to like, how are we acknowledging what's within before we trying to course correct someone else, and how can we manage our own I guess conceited interest before trying to help someone else. And so this idea of forgiveness, reconciliation, it's a long process, it's a long journey. Like I said before, it takes time. It takes time for healing to really set in before you actually are able to come to the table. And I believe it's such a beautiful process that happens when we have resolution, that when you have peace, you have that return to something so whole that God's intention was the whole time. It's something that is God's intention, and this idea of peace and reconciliation, it's a biblical principle as well. And so I think if we can replicate that in our own personal lives, how much more peaceful and how much more whole are we going to live as people when we're in perfect union with each other. So I think it's achievable, it's idealistic, but at the same time, I think we can do it. So I'm with you on this journey as well. We're in the same place, going in the same road, and hopefully get there soon.
Yeah, sooner rather than later. Your girl's tired. I need a break. So, man, I appreciate you so much, Hayet. Y'all, that is Manifest Mondays. We are manifesting all this for ourselves and for our people, all people who are suffering. We will be back on Thursday on Clubhouse, me and Hayet. But until then, I will also see you guys on Wednesday for Black Women Wednesday. I got a special girl coming on that I absolutely adore, so I'm excited for that. But thank you again so much, Hayet. Have good luck. Good luck on your meeting. I'll be waiting around for some good news. And yeah, I'm glad we can make this work. The Wi-Fi just acted up, but we got it done. So all love and blessings to everybody. And we will see you soon. Peace out, y'all.